New opportunities ahead. We've spent this entire series imagining the tools we would need for real gene control. Sensors that read tiny molecular changes, microtests that reveal hidden pathways, and synthetic logic circuits to keep everything stable. But now that we can see the whole framework, we also see the size of the challenge. Even with all these tools, extreme longevity is still a massive undertaking. So before we decide how to use these tools, before we plan our next steps, we should explore some new opportunities we haven't discussed yet. Once we can control our genes, what other systems might benefit? And how could those systems help us with the larger challenge ahead? The network isn't enough. In earlier episodes, we saw how gene networks behave like a dense board of interconnected knobs. Every adjustment creates ripples, shifting pressure through dozens of pathways upstream and downstream. Even if we could control those ripples perfectly, even if every feedback loop behaved exactly the way we wanted, the network would still solve only part of the problem, because the network doesn't work in isolation. It sits inside a much larger biological framework, with limits that come from energy, nutrients, timing, and cleanup capacity. So even with flawless network control, we still have to manage everything around it. Scaling up the superstructure. Now imagine what happens when we expand the entire regulatory superstructure itself, the genes, the controllers, and all the added logic needed to stabilize them. If extreme longevity requires us to adjust even half of the genes in the body, and each one needs one or two smart molecules to reshape its behavior, we're suddenly building a huge new layer of molecular processing on top of the original network. As soon as that superstructure starts operating, it creates its own challenges: extra signals, extra activity, and new instabilities that have to be managed with additional layers of control. It's easy to see how this expanded superstructure could place a workload equal to the original gene network, effectively doubling the total demands of the system. And all of that extra activity must still be powered, buffered, and cleaned up by the larger host system. Every improvement we imagine, more repair, more cleanup, better stress response, places greater and greater demands on the host system that has to support it. The host system sets the limits. When we zoom out from the genes and their controllers, we see that the expanded regulatory superstructure depends on a much larger cycle. All of the added sensing, signaling, repair, and cleanup has to be powered by the host system that surrounds it. That cycle begins with inputs: nutrients, oxygen, and the raw materials that cells convert into ATP and other energy molecules. Those inputs have to be digested, absorbed, transported, and delivered exactly where they're needed. And on the other side of the cycle, the host system has to remove everything that builds up: the waste products, heat, damaged molecules, and byproducts that accumulate as the system becomes more active. As the regulatory superstructure grows, every part of this intake to output chain feels the increased load. So supporting extreme longevity isn't only about adjusting genes, it's about strengthening the entire cycle that feeds the system and carries its waste away. Hidden buffers in the body. When we look at the body through the lens of the host system, something helpful stands out. Not every pathway is critical. Hair, nails, skin, pigments, and even sweat and breath are flexible systems that can be strengthened or redesigned without risking core functions. Evolution kept these pathways modest because bright colors or strong odors could attract predators or waste energy. But now that many of those old constraints no longer apply, we suddenly have new flexibility to work with. To support an expanding regulatory superstructure, we can shift some of the extra load into these safer channels. Hair and nails could become slow elimination routes. Pigments could double as stress buffers, even if the colors get a little out of control. And we might even need designer sweating protocols, controlled, optimized elimination pathways that offload byproducts without draining essential electrolytes. These aren't refined solutions, and some of them might look a bit dramatic in the mirror. But non-critical pathways like these may become important temporary buffers while more elegant options are developed. External systems lighten the load. When we step back from the body, we find another source of help: systems outside of us. If the regulatory superstructure becomes large, we don't have to handle every function internally. Some of the load can be pushed outward. Food is the first example. GMO designer foods could give us nutrients in the exact ratios the host system needs, with fewer byproducts and less metabolic cleanup. External digestive aids such as tailored enzymes and pre-processed nutrients could reduce the strain on our internal pathways and make absorption more efficient. And this idea can go even further. As sensors improve and AI-guided diets become routine, more of the metabolic work can be handled upstream, outside the body, before we ever take a bite. These external supports won't replace the regulatory superstructure, but they can shrink the amount we need to build, giving the host system more room to breathe. Our programmable microbiome. There's one more system we shouldn't overlook, and it's already inside us. The human microbiome renews itself constantly, adapts quickly, and doesn't age the way our own cells do. That makes it a unique partner for supporting a growing regulatory superstructure. With the gene control tools we've imagined in this series, there's enormous potential to redesign the microbiome from scratch, helping digest food, breaking down byproducts, steadying inflammation, and lightening the load on the host system before those molecules ever reach our own cells. It's not a shortcut to longevity, but it is a rare kind of biological leverage, a flexible, programmable companion system that can evolve with us. We've come a long way in this series, and if you're like me, what you really want to know is, how are these technologies going to change our lives over the next few decades? That's the topic of the final episode.